Buccaneers pass game coordinator and inside linebackers coach Larry Foote says we might see some Tom Brady-like play this weekend in Raymond James Stadium. That and more on today's episode of Locked On Bucs.
Your daily Tampa Bay Buccaneers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
What's up, and welcome into this Wednesday episode of Locked On Bucs, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We want to thank you for making Locked On Bucs your first listen review every single day. Don't forget you can subscribe or follow for free on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. And of course, you can follow along on Twitter. I am James Yarcho at JYarcho_Bucs. And as you can see, for those of you on YouTube, I am not with Evan Klosky on a WTSP Wednesday. No. This is a David Harrison Wednesday. You can find him at dharrison82. I think I said WTSP Tuesday. I don't know. It's been a long day. I am the deputy editor of SB Nation's BucsNation.com. David is a staff writer over at BucsGameDay.com, Sports Illustrated's Fan Nation site, covering the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And we are here with you every Monday through Friday, along with our everydayers. And as always, we want to share our appreciation for your continued support of the show.
And today's episode of Locked On Bucs brought to you by Jace Medical. Empower yourself when you purchase a Jace case, providing you with a personal supply of 5 antibiotics that treat 50 plus infections. Get yours today at jacemedical.com. That's JASE medical.com. On today's episode of Locked On Bucs, we're talking about Todd Bowles, coach of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and we're looking at some drive-ending data from Sharp Football Analytics. But first, things might look a little like the Tom Brady era when Jared Goff brings his 4-1 Lions into Raymond James Stadium for the Creamsicle Classic. That's what I'm calling it. I don't know. That's according to Buccaneers pass game coordinator and inside linebackers coach Larry Foote, who said on Monday about Lions quarterback Jared Goff. Jared
Goff.
I remember when he was drafted because I was in Arizona, Foote said. His only bad year, in my opinion, was probably his rookie year. With Sean McVay in his second year, he just took off. He's a good, savvy quarterback. What's unique about him is I put him in that group with Tom Brady and Peyton Manning as far as the play action. They sell it. They do a good job of selling it. As a linebacker, that can be tricky because it looks the same. He's making every throw, and he's a number one pick. End quote. James, there are players to compare other players to, but most people tend to stay away from Tom Brady and Peyton Manning when they're comparing quarterbacks to people. And we have not been the nicest people towards Jared Goff over the course of his career on this show. No personal disrespect. You just don't think he's that great of a quarterback. We've also sung his praises, especially this season, because he's done fairly well. And I know it's only one area of comparison, so that context I think is important. But what are your thoughts on Goff getting the Brady comparison from Coach Foote?
It's a little much. It's a little much. And I realize it's only one facet of the game. And to be fair, yes, we do take our shots at Jared Goff because overall, and we've talked about this, it's not necessarily a bad thing, but he's essentially been a game manager. Now he's kind of got this rebirth in Detroit and he's looking good. He's looking better than I expected him to this season. He's looking better than you expect him to at any point ever. And instead of making fun of him, we should be calling him King Goffrey. And look, when it comes to the play action, Jared Goff is fantastic. Like you and I were talking before we started recording, there was a play against the Carolina Panthers this past Sunday where it wasn't even play action, but he's so good at play action that when he actually did hand the ball off and then pretended to throw, he gets blasted and draws a roughing the passer penalty. And I don't know which Panther hit him, but the dude's getting up and he's like flexing and getting all hype. And the ref's like, there's flag right there because you done hit the man that didn't have the ball and he's a quarterback and you can't do that.
That's illegal, buddy.
So yeah, that does add a huge wrinkle to Jared Goff's game, to the Lions offensive prowess, that handoffs look like passes. Passes look like handoffs. They're doing direct snaps to running backs through the legs of their quarterback who is under center. And all of that is because Jared Goff has the ability to do all of that. And again, we can knock him, we can criticize him, but you have to give somebody their due when they're performing at a high level. And I think when it comes to the play action pass game, you're going to be hard pressed to find any quarterback in the NFL that's doing it as well as Jared Goff is right now.
Yeah, no, look, I mean, we all kind of laugh and chuckle and all that stuff whenever somebody compares a quarterback to Brady and Manning that isn't, Rodgers or Rodgers, Brock Purdy, Mahomes. You know what I mean? Brock Purdy. Anyway, we all kind of chuckle, right? But look, Coach Foote he's just giving his honest opinion on one facet of this guy's game, and Jared Goff does deserve credit for what he's been able to get the Detroit Lions to do, whether it's by being a game manager, just playing his part, being the point guard or whatever. But I think what Coach Foote is hitting on, though, like getting past the smirks and the snarks and all that stuff, this is important because Larry Foote he knows what it's like to play linebacker in the NFL because he's played linebacker in the NFL, and he knows what it's like to coach linebackers in the NFL because he's coached two, one of the best in Lavonte David and one of the could be the best in Devin White. And speaking of Devin White, when you think about a Buccaneers linebacker who could get caught biting on play action and give up a big play, who would that be? It would probably be Devin White. And the Detroit Lions have a running back that they haven't used very much, but they drafted him for a specific reason. And he might be playing this weekend. He didn't play last weekend, but he might be playing this weekend. And if Jahmyr Gibbs gets free against Devin White because of a play action, that could go really, really badly for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, especially how aggressive they like to be on defense. And if you can imagine 5 or 6 Buccaneers coming after Jared Goff as Devin White gets burned on a play action wheel route to Jahmyr Gibbs, I don't know if we're all that good at math. That's not a lot of defenders left to chase Jahmyr Gibbs. You know what I mean? And even David Montgomery, I mean, you give him some space, he could do some things. Amon-Ra St. Brown, again, we'll see if he comes back. Sam Laporta, is that his name? Sam Laporta, the Iowa linebacker. He's been doing really great things. Like this Lions offense, get outside of Jared Goff, but call him whatever you want to call him, distributor, game manager, scheme, system quarterback, whatever you want to call him, he's successful. You know what I mean? And if this is a big part of why he's successful, I almost wonder if Larry Foote didn't put that out there saying, like, this is a message to my linebackers. And he wants someone like us to take this comment and go way overboard with it, because honestly, we're just having fun with going overboard with it. But I think, like, to a mentality standpoint, like, if you don't respect Jared Goff's play action game, he's going to kill you with it. I think that's Larry Foote's message to his linebackers inside the room and to us on the outside without necessarily saying it flat out. So I think while we're having a little bit of fun with it here on a Tuesday recording, Wednesday midweek afternoon episode, I think it's important to understand that this play action ability of Jared Goff, this play action game of the Detroit Lions, certainly has the potential to be a very big part of why the Detroit Lions win, or stopping it, why the Buccaneers win.
Yeah, and you mentioned, we'll see if Amon-Ra St. Brown returns for this game. But even without Amon-Ra, they absolutely thrashed the Carolina Panthers because they still have playmakers everywhere. You mentioned, even though they haven't used Jahmyr Gibbs a lot, he's always a threat. David Montgomery, he's having a resurgence in Detroit. Sam Laporta, offensive rookie of the year candidate with the way that this guy is playing. And then you still have speed on top of speed on top of speed with these wide receivers, with Josh Reynolds and Jameson Williams and all these guys. It's, if you, as you said, if you don't respect it, we are going to come back on our live episode on Sunday and talk about how not respecting the play action and staying disciplined is a reason that the Detroit Lions won, or, the discipline on the defensive side is why the Buccaneers ended up winning this game.
Take it from someone who watched the entire game of film of the Denver Broncos, not knowing how to react to play action against Chicago Bears, and then watched a whole game and had to watch film of the Washington Commanders, also not knowing how to respond to play action. You don't want to see that. You don't want to see it once. You definitely don't want to see it twice or 3 times. But the Buccaneers offense, fortunately, has been pretty efficient themselves this season, and we need to talk a little bit about them. How efficient have they been? Sharp Analytics comes through with some numbers that we are going to dive into here next on today's episode of Locked On Bucs, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And today's episode of Locked On Bucs brought to you by eBay Motors. And our partners at eBay Motors have teamed up with Locked On Fantasy Football host Vinny Iyer to bring you some of the best fantasy picks each week, all season long. Whether you're prepping for a daily draft or scouting the waiver wire, every week we're going to provide you players that are a guaranteed fit to fit your roster, or guaranteed to fit your roster is what he actually said. So let's see who Vinny has picked out on this week's eBay's Guaranteed Fit Fantasy Picks of the Week. Starting off with Baker Mayfield, to the surprise of many, according to Vinny, has been a borderline QB1 in fantasy while enjoying his most efficient season as a reality passer. Speaking of efficiency, coming off of a Buccaneers Week 5 bye, he should need to pass for high volume in a matchup with Jared Goff and the red-hot Lions at home in Week 6. Mayfield has been locked into a variety of receivers, and the Lions can struggle to cover slot target Chris Godwin and tight end Cade Otton. Cade Otton getting some love in the eBay ad read. The Bucs also won't be able to run much on Detroit, leading to pleasing passing digits from Mayfield. Matthew Stafford is also an option, though, if you need to turn that way. He's been passing a ton all season long for the Rams, but recorded his first 2 TD game of the season only in Week 5 against the Philadelphia Eagles. With Cooper Kupp, Puka Nacua, and Tutu Atwell all healthy together as his clear top 3 wideouts, he will go to work with an even bigger game at home against the Arizona Cardinals pass defense, if that's what you want to call it. Sean McVay has his veteran quarterback rolling, and Stafford won't disappoint in Week 6. With his young receivers balling to help Kupp, Stafford has quickly become a rejuvenated fantasy asset for 2023 that should have more big days ahead. Vinny Iyer from Locked On NFL Football, Fantasy Football, is going to help you win your fantasy championship, and eBay Motors knows the championship team is about each player being a perfect fit, and the same goes with your vehicle. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you can make sure your ride stays running smoothly with brake kits, LED lights, roof racks, bumpers, whatever your baby needs. eBay Motors has it. With eBay Guaranteed Fit, it's guaranteed to fit your ride the first time, every time, or your money back. Plus, at these prices, you're burning rubber, not cash. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. eBay's Guaranteed Fit, only available to U.S. customers. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply.
Thank you again for making Locked On Bucs your first listener view every single day. Football season is here, and Locked On is kicking up our coverage with Locked On NFL Kickoff Live. Each Friday, Locked On will go live at 2 p.m. Eastern on every Locked On NFL YouTube channel. Hosts Tanitra, Jarvis, and Kyle will break down every game on the NFL slate to get you ready for your team's matchup, your fantasy lineups, your betting angles, and more. Plus, get the in-depth local analysis from our stable of NFL hosts across the country who know these teams better than anyone else. Find Locked On NFL Kickoff Live every Friday at 2 o'clock Eastern Time on any Locked On NFL YouTube channel. Now, David, that eBay read that you just did sent chills down my spine because my fantasy football world has completely imploded, where in 1 week I managed to get thrashed by my son, lose Justin Jefferson and Devon Achane for at least 4 weeks, and now I have to go up against the guy who has Cooper Kupp and Puka Nacua against the Cardinals. This is very bad. You know what's not very bad, though, is some numbers that Warren Sharp of Sharp Football Analytics dropped. And it's pretty interesting, covering NFL teams through the first 4 weeks of the NFL season and the rate of giving the ball back to the opposing team. So Warren Sharp showed what percentage of teams' possessions end in either a punt or a turnover. In other words, giving the ball back to your opponent. So this, again, it covers the first 4 weeks, which is perfect because the Buccaneers only played 4 games, and this is able to encapsulate all the teams having played an equal number of games. Bye weeks are not factored into this at all. So the Buccaneers have 50% of their possessions ending in a punt or a turnover. For perspective, that is the 12th best rate in the league, or you could say 11th because we have 2 teams that have the same percentage. But I count that as a tie for 10th, and then the Buccaneers are 12th. So they are behind the San Francisco 49ers with a rate of 29%, the Seattle Seahawks at 31%, Buffalo Bills at 33%, Cowboys at 36%, Dolphins at 38%, Eagles at 40%, Rams at 42%, Cardinals at 46%, the Chiefs and the Texans at 47% and the Chargers at 48%. Now, again, one more time, this is for the first 4 weeks. So you know that Cowboys percentage has changed probably pretty drastically. The Bills percentage has certainly changed. The 49ers probably got even better. But compared to the rest of the NFC South, the Buccaneers have the best percentage by a wide margin. The Buccaneers, again, at 50%. The Falcons are second at 60%. Saints at 61%. Panthers at 68%. So this is another metric. And again, these analytics, these metrics, they're not the end all be all, but they are a tool that we can use to look at the efficiency of a team. So this is another point of view as to how good the Buccaneers offense actually has been throughout the season.
Yeah, no, and it's very interesting. And obviously, the higher up on that list, the fewer possessions you have ending in a punt or a turnover, the better. So you're not surprised to see the San Francisco 49ers all the way up there at the top. I think easily they've looked the most dominant of every NFL team so far in the league, as the Philadelphia Eagles try to get their footing. The Chiefs have certainly had some stumbles. The Bills haven't looked all that great. I mean, that again, you mentioned that 33%. Well, that's before London. That's before what happened to the Jags. They punted a lot against the Jacksonville Jaguars. So, I would be curious to see what those numbers are now that they've played an extra game. But like you said, all things being equal, it shows like the Buccaneers, like this isn't a flash in the pan, right? This isn't like, a lucky break here or a lucky break there got them this win. This is kind of why we went in a little bit on Vikings fans and Vikings media who were like, oh, the Minnesota Vikings gave that game to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Like, no, that's not the case. They're playing very, very efficient football. And it's another reason why offensive coordinator Dave Canales is getting some head coaching burn. Granted, it's mostly in media circles, you know what I mean? But he's getting some attention there and all those things, and why Baker Mayfield is getting some more attention nationally, because they're doing a lot of really good things and they're doing it quickly. And that is incredibly rare. And it's incredibly impressive. You look across the NFL. Eric Bieniemy, an offensive coordinator, had a lot of hype coming into Washington, and they're not playing near as efficiently as the Tampa Bay Buccaneers are. I think their percentage is nearly 10% less or something like that. It doesn't matter. This isn't Locked On Commanders, but we talked about this, and I want to take this a step further. So we got the numbers from Warren Sharp and from Sharp and Football Analytics about how often the Buccaneers offense is punting or turning the ball over. Well, how many times though are they scoring? Because, I think the natural connection say as well, if they're only punting or turning the ball over 50% of the time, then they're scoring 50% of the time. That's not necessarily true, because there's end of halves, end of games. There's safeties. There's turnovers on downs, which are turnovers on downs, but they're not actually turnovers, and all these things. So here's the raw data basically. Week 1 against the Minnesota Vikings, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers had 12 possessions. They scored on 4 of them. Week 2, they had 10 possessions. They scored on 4 of them. Week 3, they had 9 possessions against the Eagles. They scored on 2 of them. Week 4, they had 11 possessions against the Saints. They scored on 5 of them. So total, that's 42 possessions the Tampa Bay Buccaneers have had this season, and they've scored on 15 of those. That's 36% of the time the Tampa Bay Buccaneers are putting up points when they touch the ball. And that might sound a little bit low, but in reality, it's actually not a bad number. Now, let's get a little bit deeper into the weeds in this. 38% of the time, Baker Mayfield is putting this offense in scoring position, because there's a blocked field goal that we have to account for, that they were in scoring position. So now when you're talking about Baker and you're talking about Dave Canales, their offense is putting this team in position to be successful 38% of the time. But now let's trim the fat a little bit. You got 3 end-of-game possessions. Those 3 end-of-game possessions were all wins. So you're killing the clock. We're not going to hold that against them. You also have a halftime possession against the Minnesota Vikings where they intercepted the ball with 16 seconds left in their own end, Tampa Bay 21. We're not going to fault you for not throwing a Hail Mary or trying to drive down the field with 16 seconds from your own 21. So if you take those drives off, now you're scoring on 15 drives out of 38, what we call real possessions. That's 39% of the time. And then 42% of the time, Baker and Canales are putting them in scoring position. That's 4 to 5 times per game, guys. 4 to 5 times per game, Baker Mayfield and Dave Canales are putting the Buccaneers in position to put points on the board. That's 28 to 35 points. Or if you throw a couple field goals in there, 21 to 32 points, 31 points, 21 to 31 points a game that you are basically putting yourself in position to score. And if you're scoring over 20 per game, you're in a good position to win games. If you're scoring more than 24 per game, you're definitely putting yourself in position to win games. So that's what this offense is doing. This defense has been really good in a lot of stretches and really impressive in a lot of stretches. But James, this offense is giving complementary football is not something we've talked about a lot around the Tampa Bay Buccaneers over the decades, but complementary football, even without Tom Brady, is still here.
The biggest thing that I want to take away from this, and that I want our listeners and viewers to take away from this is, and I'm going to take the Eagles game, we're going to throw it out. Just pick it up, toss it, it's out of here. Take a look at the way the Buccaneers offense has performed. You just ran through it. Week 1, they scored on 33% of possessions. Week 2, 40%. Week 4, 45%. We have a continued escalation of possessions correlating or ending in scoring drives. And those numbers are before you removed those non-real possessions, essentially, those end of game, end of half. So you're seeing the constant and consistent growth of Dave Canales and Baker Mayfield running this offense. Dave Canales getting more comfortable as a play caller and a game planner. Baker Mayfield getting more comfortable within the offense with his teammates. So this is something that you can look back on, that we can revisit this after week 8, after week 9, when there's probably going to be another game or two that you're going to want to throw out, because I still don't think the Bills or the 49ers game are going to be anything pretty. But this gives you encouragement that really, no matter who's lining up across the field, you can trust that your offense has been good enough, smart enough, and efficient enough to give themselves opportunities to score points, whether it's a field goal or a touchdown. But there's plenty more to talk about. And as David loves to do each and every week, coming up next, we are talking about Todd here on the Locked On Bucs podcast. Everyone should be empowered to care for themselves and their loved ones during the unexpected. That's why Jace Medical offers the Jace Case. The Jace Case provides 5 life-saving antibiotics for emergency use and gives you peace of mind so that you are not just hoping that you have access to medication in an emergency. Jace Medical makes sure that you have medication in hand, and Jace Medical is making things simple. They handle everything from the online evaluation to licensed pharmacy medication delivery and ongoing consultation and care. Don't get caught unprepared. Save more than $360 by getting these life-saving antibiotics with Jace Medical, plus an additional $20 off by using code LOCKEDON at checkout at jacemedical.com. That's JASE medical.com, promo code LOCKEDON. Wrapping things up here on a Wednesday edition of the Locked On Bucs podcast. James Yarcho, David Harrison. That's right, it is not a WTSP Wednesday, but hopefully we'll have Evan back next week. The Lightning are playing during normal recording time, so he's busy. But David, it's time to do your favorite thing of the week, and that is talk about Todd. And of course, we mean Todd Bowles. And look, this is a football team that no one had expectations for, other than to be in contention for Caleb Williams, who apparently wouldn't have played for the Buccaneers anyway, according to the list of teams that he said he's willing to play for. They were not expected to compete within the division. Baker Mayfield was washed and busted, and why bother, and all that nonsense. But now, Tampa Bay Buccaneers 3-1, atop the NFC South, in contention for a playoff spot. Looks like things are humming along pretty well.
Yeah.
Is Todd Bowles a Coach of the Year candidate?
So I got to give a hat tip to Good Morning Football, because this was actually a Good Morning Football topic. And the way that they did it is they actually presented, I think it was, I can't remember who it was, honestly. It was one of the hosts. They presented that Indianapolis Colts head coach, Shane Steichen, I can't remember say his name right, could be the leader for Coach of the Year. And there could be some merit to that, right? But then they went around the table, as they do, and they all brought up their candidates, or if they agreed that the Indianapolis Colts coach should be the Coach of the Year. And Devin McCourty right? He's a Good Morning Football McCourty brother.
I think so.
I believe so. I apologize if it's not. He brought up Todd Bowles, and he mentioned that Todd Bowles should probably be the coach of the year. So I saw, I was like, you know what? Coach Bowles didn't do a Monday press conference and said that was Larry Foote when he compared Jared Goff to Tom Brady, because that makes sense. Let's talk about Todd Bowles, not what he's saying, but what he's doing. We weren't alone. A lot of people, James, gave a lot of grief to Todd Bowles last year for kind of what happened. And I think towards the end of the year, we kind of started getting on the train of like, look, Todd got the job out of nowhere, no time to prep his staff, no time to plan his staff. He basically it was just like, here's your job, here's your staff, go and deal with it. And we saw all the changes that they made. And now this is basically his staff and the new offense coordinator and all this other stuff. As much blame as he got last year for an offense coordinator who's literally now cold calling people saying, hey, can I have a job? Does he deserve credit this year? Because that's usually how this works, right? You get the blame, you also get the credit. But a lot of people are giving the credit to Dave Canales and still kind of harboring some hard feelings towards Todd Bowles. And granted, there have been some other decisions that have been a part of that. But does Todd Bowles deserve a lot of credit for what's going on with the Buccaneers this year? 3-1, first place in the NFC South, just beat the Saints. Or does he not?
Well, yeah, of course he does. Like, plain and simple, of course he does. This is still Todd Bowles' defense. This is still his system. And like you said, he didn't have the luxury or the opportunity to put together his staff. So if you're going to place the blame on the shoulders of Todd Bowles and say that last year was his fault, if you want to blame Byron for part of it, that's fine. But a lot of people were saying, look, Todd Bowles is not a head coach, period. It's not who he is. You have to turn around and you have to give him credit that, okay, he went out and got his guys. And if you're going to give credit to Dave Canales, who's the one that went out and hired Dave Canales? Todd Bowles is the guy that wanted there was somebody on the Bucs Nation Facebook page when the story came out that Dave Canales was getting attention as a potential head coaching candidate for the Chicago Bears. And he said fire light, spelled it lich, but said fire light. It's like, okay, now wait a minute. So because the GM and the head coach zeroed in on a offensive coordinator candidate that they then hired, who is succeeding enough through the first quarter of the season to be in the conversation for a potential head coaching candidate, you should fire the GM for making the hire that was good enough. Like, it doesn't match up. Like that train of thought derailed forever ago. So yeah, if you're going to blame Todd Bowles, but you want to give credit to Dave Canales, you also have to give that credit to Todd Bowles because he wanted Dave Canales. And again, just like I talked about on the divisional crossover when everyone was bashing the Bucs and saying they were going to finish dead last because they're going from Brady to Baker, you also have to take into account things that are beyond Todd Bowles' control last year. All those injuries that piled up and all the problems that piled up because of those injuries, Todd can't control that. There's nothing you can do about that. You could have Andy Reid, or you could have Bill Belichick, or you could have, name any of these, the amazing and great. You could have kneecap biting MCDC Dan Campbell. It's not going to change the fact that you're running your team with second, third practice squad string players. So credit where credit's due, man. Todd Bowles has been fantastic this year.
Yeah, I mean, look, Todd Bowles was getting a lot of grief last year for not firing Byron Leftwich earlier. So he deserves all the credit in the world for bringing in the right guy for the job. And so far through, 4 games, 5 weeks, Dave Canales has certainly looked like the right guy. And by the way, Dave Canales is a minority. So if he gets hired away this offseason, you're getting draft picks. So don't forget that whole thing. My honest concern, and not from an organizational point of view, honestly, from a fan base point of view, and to that, it's only a minimal concern because fans don't make decisions. Media doesn't make decisions. I almost wonder if we're going to have people kind of pulling for the old Dirk Cutter, Lovie Smith swap. You know what I mean? Like Dave Canales starts getting attention and they extend Baker Mayfield to a 3-year deal or whatever it is. And instead of people aren't going to want to see Dave Canales get hired away. So they're going to say, fire Todd Bowles, make Larry Foote the defensive coordinator, and hire and keep Dave Canales the way they did Dirk Cutter and Lovie Smith. And I don't think that would necessarily be the right answer either. We're a long way away from that. But the other question, obviously, that we have to answer, does Todd Bowles deserve Coach of the Year consideration? And I would say absolutely yes, he does. I don't know if I'm not going to rank him right now. We're 5 weeks in. We're not even to Halloween yet, but I'm not going to rank him. We'll talk again in December if this conversation is still valid. But I think a lot of times Coach of the Year, it comes from either personal strife, right? You look at Coach Pagano with the Indianapolis Colts when he came back, or you look at Coach Arians, right, filling in for him while he was gone, or you look at expectations for the team. And right now, like, why are the Indianapolis Colts in this conversation? Because of what the Colts are doing versus what they are expected to do. I think Dan Campbell obviously has to be in that conversation. But yes, I think absolutely Todd Bowles. When you're talking about a team, again, you just mentioned it, everybody from the breakfast table to whatever ESPN airs on their channel nowadays, everybody was talking about the Tampa Bay Buccaneers being in the running for Caleb Williams. Well, now they're in the run-in for a division championship. So absolutely, if the season were to end today, Todd Bowles is absolutely in that conversation. Does he win? I don't know. Fortunately, the season's not over, so we don't have to have that conversation. But yes, Todd Bowles absolutely 100% certainly should be in the NFL Head Coach of the Year conversation. And I think that's a great way to do talking about Todd this weekend, since he didn't want to talk to us.
And let's not forget that Todd Bowles was frequently mentioned as one of the favorites to be the first head coach fired this year, despite the fact that the Glazers have never fired a coach in season. So those predictions were already bad from that aspect. But people don't know that. We talked about it numerous times on this episode. The national media does not understand the ins and outs of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. So Todd Bowles was never going to be the first head coach fired. Now he definitely isn't going to get fired. And shoot, he's winning his way towards an extension. But that is going to do it for this episode of Locked On Bucs. Everydayers, make sure you are coming back tomorrow. It is a crossover Thursday. I will be joined by Locked On Lions host Matt Derry as we break down the Creamsicle Classic at the new Old Sombrero there in Tampa. Please make sure you are checking out everything that I'm doing over at BucsNation.com. Check out what David is doing over at BucsGameDay.com. Follow everything on Twitter at LockedOnBucs, at JYarcho_Bucs, and at DHarrison82. Hope you all have an absolutely outstanding day. Stay safe, stay healthy, fire the cannons. Thank you so much for joining us right here on Locked On Bucs, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.